Hey, and welcome back to the #1 podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 102. This is our 2-year anniversary, baby. Yeah, it's a little weird. I think I heard one time that most podcasts don't get past 3 episodes. Well, we're gonna keep sticking this out because I find it fun. So, I mentioned that I wanted the 100th episode to be like a special event and all that, so that's why I did it live. And this one was going to be probably more of like a retrospect thing, because it's an anniversary, right? So that made sense to me, and then I was thinking about it, I'm like, how do you do a retrospect on like a podcast? It's just a podcast. Maybe I could like source... I could source like best of moments or things that people really liked, but there's like maybe 30 people who listen to this thing regularly, give or take 20 or so viewers. So like I don't really have enough people who would like submit clips or something like that. So I was like, what do I... It's really, mulling it over in my head. What do I do? I guess I could just talk about the first year of the Cellar in general, because I've never really done that before. I've just actually taken like a retrospect on where the whole Cellar project started. So that's what I want to do today. It also gives me time to stall, because there's some games that I want to talk about that I can't, because I have to finish other things first, because there's a lot of stuff coming out. So yeah, I should actually probably write down notes for that. Oh, we saw Spider-Verse. It was good, by the way. I'm not going to devote a whole podcast segment to it. We saw Spider-Verse and it was good. So like, yeah, you will probably enjoy it. I would be shocked if you didn't like it. It's probably better than the original, in my opinion. I think it's probably better. I think I even liked it more than the original, which I always thought was pretty good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we get into that, we got the comment review, baby. First question comes to us from Lozy. Actually, our only question this week. Our only real question this week. It says, referring to when I was talking about the terrible looking gameplay of Bolt Gun by IGN, Lozy said that IGN effect happened with the last Sonic, which showed gameplay that didn't convince anyone and caused some delays. After that, the game came out pretty decent. Yeah, I remember looking at... I think we even talked about it on the podcast. I think it was a cat episode. When we talked about Sonic Frontiers, that's what it was called. I was going to say Forces. That's the other one that starts with an F. Sonic Frontiers. And I remember watching the gameplay, like the 2-minute gameplay preview, and just thinking to myself, oh, they should not have shown this. This looks bad. And then I never paid attention to the game afterwards. I probably wouldn't have... Well, actually, no, I did watch a little bit of it when it came out. Just some YouTubers and peoples that I watch play it. And I was like, yeah, still not interested. So, did not sell me on it. I don't remember if I said it, but I'm done with my classic Doom journey. I have played the 164 official maps, counting expansions, official chapters, master levels, final Doom, and even those 2 extra maps from the OG Xbox version. That's a deep pull. That's a deep trip. I'm taking a break from the series before moving on to Doom 64, which from what I've seen looks pretty much like those modern indies trying to be retro Dooms. Haha. Did you play any from Doom 64 onwards? And adds on at the end, I have yet to see Guardians 3, so this time it was more than 18 minutes of a podcast for me. Haha. I like the first one better, although the second one has more comical moments. Yeah. So have I played... I have played Doom 64. I have not gotten a chance to play like Doom 2016. I own it. for some reason I've just never gotten around to it, or Eternal. But I've played everything, or Doom 3 actually. I've not played anything that came out after Doom 64. Doom 64 is a cool game though. I like that game. It is the most consistent Doom in like official Doom game in terms of quality. In that, like, every Doom game, like the Doom 1 and 2, great games, some of my favorites, right? But they're a bit of a roller coaster of quality. They all kind of like start out strong, really strong, and then they kind of really dip in the middle, and they start bringing it back by episode 3 or the last third, and then they're over. And it's a bit of a mixed experience when you look at it like that. Doom 64 is consistently quite good. It never really has a serious dip in quality. There's maybe some maps that I like more than others, but for the most part, it's just a really solid Doom game. And I would recommend maybe looking up some guides to know how to get the secret weapon, the secret super weapon, and how to power it up and all that. The Unmaker. Yeah, pretty cool. That's a cool gun. I like that game quite a bit. It does. You say it looks like modern indies trying to be retro Dooms. I think I sort of see what you mean. It definitely has its own visual style compared to the other, the first two Doom games. A lot of people have the misconception that Doom 64 was just like a remake or was just a port of Doom 1. No, not at all. It is a completely new game. It's more deserving of being called Doom 3 than the actual Doom 3 in terms of like gameplay. It is way more similar to the first two than Doom 3 is. It was actually supposed to be called, I believe, like Doom the not the Reckoning, but it had some like some it's escaping me right now. It had some title. I literally I wish I could remember it. If I just look up like Doom 64, it's something really edgy sounding. Original title. The Absolution. Yeah, The Absolution. It was going to be called that, and then someone at some point was like, no, you got to call it Doom 64. And a lot of people just ended up skipping over it. But no, it's a cool game, and I would recommend checking it out. Has some cool ideas. Slightly different art style. A little, I don't know. There's a lot of like castles and blue and water, like kind of like a lot more water in Doom 64 than the other games. I don't know. It's got a slightly different vibe. It's also a lot more atmospheric. Soundtrack is really different than like the rock scores of the first two games. It's cool. Give it a shot. That was our one question. My neck, and we're gonna jump straight into talking about, I guess, just like a retrospect on the whole Cellar thing. So I know that there's some, I guess, maybe confusion that's sometimes created by the fact that, like, no, I do not call myself the Cellar. I'm Tigan. The Cellar, this is my dumb artist thing. The Cellar is a project of mine. That's always how I think about it. It's a project of mine that's on this YouTube channel, or not this YouTube channel. It's technically this YouTube channel. Cellarcast. That it's on its channel, and I could theoretically go do something else, and that is not the Cellar, and you would not. I would not, I'm my own person, kind of thing. So how did it come about? The Cellar began because after I graduated high school in 2020, I was like, well, I'm gonna take a gap year. A gap year. The joke is that it's not a year. It's a big gap. It's like, I'm not gonna go to college because I don't want to go to college. I don't like the school system. And I am going to stay home for a little while and just take a break and not do anything, like no obligations, because I've been going to school for 12 years and I am going to assert myself and take a year-long break at least. And that was great. That was great for a while. And then at a certain point, as kind of, what happens after I kind of recovered from school, was that I got bored and I wanted to do something. And I love retro games. So I'd already kind of made the decision that, like, well, I want to be some kind of a writer, some kind of a creative novelist. That was like my main thing before this. I wrote a couple books in high school, and then I started work on a book after I graduated. So I still have technically a WordPress website that I was like, oh, why don't I just make this like the dump, like repository for all the stuff that I do. So I decided to start the original form of the Cellar was a blog, and the idea of it was that every day I would do a different retro game, a different old game, that my cutoff being like pretty much just stuff from the 90s and before, at the 90s at the latest. That was my cutoff point. So my day would kind of consist of, I would wake up early in the morning, which was nice. I had such a good sleep schedule back then. I would wake up early in the morning, and then I would go on My Abandonware and find just a random game that I thought looked interesting. I'd play it for a little bit. I would record it, and then I would record my gameplay, and then I would write a little blog post, usually with just screenshots, but sometimes if I really liked the soundtrack, what I would do is edit together a little montage of gameplay footage that was maybe like 30, 40 seconds from the footage that I'd recorded, and I made these like little, these little montages set to the game's soundtrack if I liked a song from it. And then I kind of did that for, I want to say I did that for like a few months, every single day. And I also had an Instagram account where I have not touched in so long, I think probably years at this point, where I would also just upload a copy of that. It was just, I would upload a blog post, and then I would upload to a post to the Instagram account. And then at a certain point I was like, okay, I feel comfortable with this. I want to start expanding what this project is. And so I moved to... Oh, yeah, I feel like I've explained it before, but the name The Cellar was because I was thinking about, like, I wanted a name that elicited kind of... I wanted something that was... It sounded underground. The basement, or I was like, yeah, basement's not quite right, Something that was underground and that had some kind of relation or hint to the theme of the project, which was initially all about retro games, and it still kind of is for the most part. I will sometimes talk about a recent thing, but that's pretty rare. For the most part, this channel, or this main Cellar channel, is about older stuff, more, stuff that's at least 10 years old, at the very least. So, yeah, and I eventually settled on The Cellar because it was like, I was like, I'm bringing out these things from gaming history that have aged, either well or not so well, and I am presenting them to you. I'm bringing them up from the cellar, right? You're getting this stuff up from the cellar, and I was like, oh, I like that. It has a nice, it had all this. The name had all the stuff that I was looking for. I like the sound of it. It has that kind of underground, cool connotation, and I just kind of picked that, and the rest is history, which I will continue recounting. So eventually, I just sort of got a little content with where I was at with the blog, and I wanted to. It's like one of those things. I grew up watching YouTube. I've been watching YouTube my whole life. I think I've probably accessed YouTube every single day of my life, or almost every single day, with maybe a few exceptions of, like, when I go camping or something like that. Pretty much every single day for over 10 years. which it, oh god, when did I even make my YouTube account? Like, I want to say I was 8 or 9 years old when I originally made my YouTube account. Don't tell Google, because you have to be 13. And it was, so, yeah, over 10 years now. Over 12, 13 years by this point. So, like, I've been on this website for a long time, and I've always been interested in doing YouTube. I don't know. It was a format that online video was like a format that always spoke to me, and then I really responded to. I think I'd stopped watching television by the time I was like 11 or something like that, and I pretty much just started watching YouTube for all of my, I guess, like passive viewing content sort of thing. And it's like, you know, I have to at some point, right? I gotta at least try YouTube out. So if you go back and you really look through this channel, initially I started out in late 2020, October 2020 specifically, because my idea was like, okay, October's coming up. Why don't I do like a horror themed thing on a YouTube channel? I'd already made a YouTube channel so that I could upload those little montages that I was making for the blog and just have them like privated or unlisted, whatever. So I was like, why don't I use that channel? And, you know, it was fitted with all the branding and all that already, because I've always been serious about branding, getting my, you know, making my channel recognizable and memorable. So I was like, what I'm gonna do is every single day in October, I'm gonna stream a horror game. And I was like, I'm gonna start off with Silent Hill, because I've never played Silent Hill. So the first thing I ever really did on this channel was a live stream playthrough. About over the course of a week, I played through the entirety of the original Silent Hill on the PlayStation 1. And I remember they got off to a really rocky start with a lot of technical issues. But hey, I figured it out eventually. Thank God, you know, I now have just like, I don't have to think about my streaming setup, because I have all like the settings figured out and all that, so I can just kind of hit, you know, go live and not have to worry about the stream crashing or bugging out. I was also doing all of this on an old, like, what was it? It wasn't a Toshiba. It was an HP laptop, this old HP laptop that was like already like 3 years old at that point. Like really cheap, like $300 HP laptop. So I was doing that, and I did about a month of that. And the second I finished Silent Hill within a week. And then after that, I went and I played, because I love blood, right? I went and played. This was around the time that Civvy 11's video. I would totally recommend Civvy 11's channel. I love his videos. But he made a video on a game called, a mod for blood called Death Wish. And I watched like the first little bit of that video, and I was like, I should probably play this myself. And hey, you know what's a great excuse to play it? Because I'm doing horror games, or, you know, spooky themed games all month on my YouTube channel. So I streamed that, and man, that game, it really is like a game. I almost caught myself and said mod, but it honestly feels like the real sequel to Blood. It feels like the true sequel over, you know, the actual Blood 2. I would recommend playing Blood, the original, if for no other reason than just to play Death Wish. It is fantastic. It's one of those games that, like, you're playing it, and it took so long to finish. It's like a long game. And while I was in the middle of playing it, everything else sucked. It's just so good. The level design is so tight. All the combat encounters are just so refined. It's a game that's literally been in development, being updated and refined for like over 10 years now. Just regular, sort of regular updates to it. There's a new version coming out, and it's gonna, with a lot of like touch-ups for already incredible stellar levels, and a new like 4th episode, which I can't wait for. I cannot wait for that, dude. And there was a level in there, I want to say it was E3M2 or something like that. There was a level in there. I liked a lot of levels from Death Wish, a lot. But there was one in particular that was one of my favorites, and it was called Duck and Cover. And I was so enamored with this level and how just absolutely brilliant it was in terms of design that I was inspired to make something about it. And so I made the first episode of The Cellar, which was uploaded November 17th, 2020. I made that. I want to say it took me like 3 weeks to make that because I was figuring out a lot of stuff, a lot of editing stuff. And I gotta mute something. And it's like a 25-minute video. It's like a decent length video. And it's just, I have not rewatched it in forever. I'm a little scared too because the audio, my old audio, really, really sucks. But yeah, that's where this channel began, was me talking about level design. Because I was like, this is awesome. I want to talk about it. I think, oh my god, the description is, there's probably some audio funny business in here. I don't know. Yeah. So that video came out, it has 107 views. Interesting. And I was like, I want to make videos. Like, I want to transition into making videos. I feel like I have to give this a shot at some point. So I kind of kept streaming, but streaming eventually sort of fell off for me. I don't know. I think I just lost interest in doing it regularly. I don't know. It was like very slow, not a lot of interaction and all that. When did I really give up on doing regular streaming? I gotta look now. It was around like March of 2021 when I was playing Knights of the Old Republic. That was kind of like, there's a number of reasons. I could get to that later. That I sort of stopped streaming around then. But I was doing that in addition to making videos. And it's funny enough, we'll get to that in a second. So the second video I ever made was gloriously awful 2000s video game ads. Which is probably still a pretty funny video. I think I just literally took 2 different ads and just kind of milked them for a bit. I don't know if it gets repetitive at all, but I think it's pretty... At the time, I was like, I love like terrible advertising and marketing, and there's such a fascinating history in games with that, because games are really like no other entertainment industry, where the advertising for them was so crazy, because it was like the 90s when a lot of that like really kicked off. So it was like the peak. You have this industry that is almost, it's a whole entertainment industry. It is almost exclusively targeted at children, and we're in the 90s. So the advertising is crazy. And then that sort of like weird sophomoric approach carried through to the 2000s. There's like this interesting thing where 2000s video game marketing, how do I describe it? I think there was a way of describing it. It was... As time goes on, originally games were originally they were for families. And then it became more of like a kid's market, right? We were marketing towards children. And then it started edging up a little bit as the years went on, and the audience for games literally grew older and was still open to buying them. So now it became like, we go from kids / middle schoolers to like high schoolers, teenagers kinds of thing. And then you hit the 2000s, and we're in like college age, right? Like young people, young men specifically, because this is a boys' industry. This is for boys. And you have these like out of touch So there's like so there's another thing to this, which is that there was a lot of marketing. It's like we're marketing towards, I don't know how do I, we're marketing towards like teenagers and like young adults, very young adults. And what do they want to be? They want to be adults. You know, kids want to be like adults, but it's like a child's, you have like Paul marketing, you have an out of touch like 40 something Gen Xer who is trying to advertise, he's trying to appeal to what a child thinks an adult is like. And it's like the worst, and it's so funny. Like, it's so bad. Really fascinating time and little like niche part of history is 2000s video game marketing, where it was just, oh god, it's so bad, just so bad. And that was about that. There was one for Shadow the Hedgehog, and then a really weird Q&A article that was supposed to be like in character with Dante from Devil May Cry. Bad. The next video I did, I thought this was I thought this was my second video, but no, it was like my third. Was Megaman 2 is not flawless. So, this was because I made this video because I still wanted to, I think eventually in the early parts of this channel, I really wanted to talk about game design because it's something that I'm interested in. But what I sort of came to realize is that I don't know if I can like actually attract people to my channel just talking about game design. But what I can do sometimes is talk about a game that could be interesting, and then also in that talk about like parts of game design. Or something like that. I feel like I'm a lot better. I feel like my strong suit, what I eventually figured out, was that I was good. I think I'm pretty good at like telling stories. So I try to aim for topics that let me tell stories and aren't just like, here's an analysis of this thing. And if I'm going to do an analysis, it has to be kind of like wrapped in a story. I think that's how I like contextualize a lot of the world, is through telling stories. But at this point I was still like pretty into like, okay, I was still experimenting with a lot of different video kind of topics. So this video, the third one, Megaman 2 is not flawless, was very much like me talking about, I'm just going to talk about game design for 23 minutes, almost 24 minutes. So like the inspiration for this really came from the fact that like I would not call myself a Mega Man 2 hater. All of these feelings were very genuine, and I actually still agree with everything I said in that video. I have been a Mega Man fan my whole life, for most of my life, I want to say, since I was like a really little kid. I have loved Mega Man. I always thought it was awesome. I still love Mega Man. And I have grown up with the internet's narratives about the Mega Man series. And then I actually played all of the games and realized that people were full of shit and they were super wrong. They were really wrong. So my favorite game in the classic Mega Man series is Mega Man 6. That is my favorite one. And I have always heard people talk about, okay, here is the normie casual understanding of the Mega Man series, the classic series at least. Mega Man 1 is, they were still figuring it out. Like, it's a good game, but they were still figuring it out. And it has, it's just like they didn't know the formula yet. Mega Man 2, we jump to, this is the best in the series. This is one of the best games on the whole NES. This is such a good game, dude. This is the best one in the whole series. And then Mega Man 3, it's like, it's like pretty good, but it's not like quite as good as 2, but it's like really good. It's like it's like almost, it's like almost as good. And then Mega Man 4, like, it's okay, like, it's fine. And Mega Man 5 is like, it's not really as good. It's like it's really not that great. It's like maybe it's kind of okay. 6 is like why'd they make this, dude? Why'd they make 6? This one's not good. 7. Oh, 7's bad. Oh, 7. I don't like. Oh, 7 sucks, dude. 8. Oh, 8 is so dog shit. 8 sucks ass. Mega Man 8 sucks. Oh, Mega Man 9. Oh, Mega Man 9 is great. Mega Man 9 is so good. Mega Man 9 is one of the best in the series, and 10 is like it's almost as good as 9, but it's like it's not quite as good. And this is a bunch of bullshit. This is a bunch of fucking bullshit. Mega Man 2 has a ton of problems. I think Mega Man 2 is one of the worst ones in the classic series, to be honest. I think it has like some serious problems in like every aspect that I care about when it comes to a Mega Man game. And you know what game I think does all of those things, just hits the nail on the head for all of them? It's Mega Man 6. That game like does not have I will fight you to the death over this. That game has no bad levels. All the levels in that game are great. They rock. The weapon design and balancing is fantastic. They all have unique purposes. None of them are like overtly way stronger than the other ones, so you can actually approach situations in a number of ways, which is like the cool part of Mega Man, is getting all the different weapons and being able to solve, combat problems with them. 6 is like, oh, dude, like 6 just like, for me, and not to mention the fact that it uses the NES hardware absolutely brilliantly. It's one of the big inspirations for a video I did, a while ago, which was it was like the late era, I forget what I called it, like the lost age of NES or something, about like late era NES games. 6 was the game, Mega Man 6 was the game that made me realize, made me curious about that era, and made me realize, like, after I played it, how good a lot of those games from that time are. So, yeah, it just frustrated me, and I was like, I'm going to make a video to explain the problems that I have with Mega Man 2 on, like, a really specific level. It is literally a screen-by-screen analysis of the level design of Mega Man 2, and then an analysis of all of the weapons. Like, it's pretty in-depth. It's like 23 minutes where I go through literally every single level, and talk about the things that work and the things that I don't think are well executed, which is a lot of it. And how bad the weapon balancing is, and how it trivializes like half of the game's like total design. Yeah, I agree with everything. I back this video up 100%, with 100%, with 1,000%. Yeah. The fourth video is a bit of a weird one. It was called "Why I Drop League of Legends." So I played League of Legends for like a number of years. I played it for like 7 years, from the time I was in middle school, on and off, and then eventually kind of petered a little out, but I was on and off again throughout high school, and I have like a weird relationship with that game. And that video is me talking about why I eventually drop it, and the sort of weird existentialism about games that technically, like, you can play them, but they don't exist anymore. That, like, there are versions of League of Legends that I played that don't exist anymore. It's a fundamentally different game in the way that it plays and the way that strategies work. And I mean, got like the most literal thing is so many characters are different. And like, how would you even, I remember just thinking about, like, how would you even review League of Legends? It's like a pointless endeavor. Like, how do you, as a piece of art, like, how? It's like this constantly changing thing. Anything you write about it or say about it will be obsolete very soon. Very soon. I remember hearing that this was like, there's this League YouTuber who is not a League of Legends YouTuber anymore. His name is Magikarp Used Fly, and I loved his videos, man, back in the day. And I remember when he decided to stop making videos about the game, one of the things that he said was, and this was years out, I think, yeah, this was way after I made this video in particular, but it's on topic. One of the things he said was that, I'm pretty sure it was made after this video. One of the things he said was that, so his like main series were called Actual Champion Spotlights, which were just kind of like humorous video. So, you know, League of Legends, they would do, whenever a new champion came out, they would do, Riot would put out a champion spotlight video going over their abilities and everything. And then his version, the Actual Champion Spotlight, was about just a humorous look at like the state of a character. Of like, yeah, here's this ability, here's how fucking bullshit it is, here's how ridiculous this is and how unbalanced it is. And he would, you know, it's all in like a funny, humorous way. And those videos are I don't know if they work at all if you haven't played the game or didn't play the game back then, but I used to love those. They were like really funny and unique compared to what a lot of other people were doing at the time. Well, there wasn't a lot of content at the time for the game besides Video Game Donkey, who a lot of people don't realize was the original League YouTuber, was like the guy. He was the League YouTuber. He was the biggest guy in the community. So Magikarp's videos were a really cool, like, scripted comedy thing about the game. And one of his, when he talked about quitting making videos about the game, one of the things that he said that, like, bothered him was that the game changes so much that, like, almost every single one of his actual champion spotlights that he made is outdated. Like, it literally doesn't apply to the game. Not just in terms of like, oh, this character's gotten weaker or stronger. Like, the character has been reworked twice kind of thing. And they're just a completely different champion compared to when he made the video. And that kind of like, you know, in some way you could see it as, oh, it's like a time capsule of the game and all that. But for him, that was very, I don't know, kind of like demoralizing that it didn't, the game changed so much that his all this stuff he put so much effort into, like, was basically obsolete. My nose is really runny right now for some reason. So I don't remember what I talked about too much in this video, but yeah, it was like, my main point and what the reason I have never really gone back to the game is that the game that I really liked doesn't exist anymore. It's played fundamentally differently. It doesn't work the same. Maybe I could jump in and have fun again, but it would be different. And like, well, I would like to play, you know, Season 6 League of Legends or something like that. I don't want to play season, God, what are they on, 11, 12? God, no, it's 2023. They have to be on season like 13 by now. Like, Jesus Christ. And then, you know, actually one of the other reasons that I really dropped League of Legends, which I don't know if I went into that video, was that I realized that the game was just becoming like too frustrating. I have a lot of like legitimate grievances that aren't just like, oh, the game's different. I think the game has like a bunch of issues, like it's way too team reliant. It has a lot of like I don't know. There's like a lot of things with the game that just kind of like rub me the wrong way and that I actually realized I don't like about it. And eventually those things just kind of kept piling on until I realized I wasn't having as much fun with it and I was losing interest. And the things that I liked about League of Legends were better served for me in other genres. Fighting games. It was fighting games. I was like, wait, I like playing top lane because it's like the 1v1 lane and I get to have these cool like micro interactions with my opponent. And I started playing Skullgirls and I'm like, wait, that's the whole game and I don't have to worry about other people on my team fucking it up for me. It's just my fault. I can accept it being my fault way more than it being someone else's fault. That shit's annoying. At least put me in control when I lose. Yeah, I am not one for team games. So, like, I don't know, I should just play fighting games. And now I do. Now I do. I left. This video is also kind of interesting because, fuck, we're only like 4 videos into the whole channel. And I've already been talking for like 40 minutes. The video is also interesting because it eventually became part of, it sort of turned into a little like side series that I had called, I just called them like ramble rants because I would just ramble and rant. It's not technically a part of the Cellar. Like, I don't include it on that playlist because I just thought of it as more of like the rant videos that I used to do. I only made a handful of them. And then that eventually turned into this podcast. So yeah, that's where this podcast comes from. It's the video Why I Dropped League of Legends. After that, we have the big one. Konami E3 2010, where are they now? Yeah, so this is probably where, I don't know if it's where the people, I'd be curious like where everyone who's listening right now might have found my channel from. But I would wager to bet it's probably this video. This is one of the two. It's either that or the Yakuza one. And yeah, this one this was an interesting case. So the way that this came about was I loved it was inspired by the classic Krobcat video. Just like Konami E3 2010 highlights or something like that. It's his like 10-minute compilation of like all the funny cringy moments from that conference. And as I outlined at the beginning of that video, underneath his video, there's a comment that says like, I'd love to see a where are they now on all of these people. And I was just sitting in my room, right? And I was like, I could just make that. That sounds interesting. I'd like to see that too. I'll just do that because I like researching stuff. So it was literally that person's comment. You can still go to that video and you don't have to scroll down that far to find that comment. And hilariously, there are now people who never checked the date that the comment was left versus my video. And they're saying like, a guy called the Cellar already made that video. So you just go watch that. It's really funny. So like, yeah, that was the inspiration for it. And then just, I did all that. I researched this conference for like 2 or 3 days straight because there were so many people and there were so many games. And, because that was the other thing is that there was like a comment under that video that was like, what's weird or that like adds to the strange, like funny element of it is that like, I've never heard of any of these games except for this conference. And I was like, that is kind of funny. I don't think I have either besides the Silent Hill one that they announced or showed off. So that was why I also included information on the games. And I have this weird relationship with this video because I put it out I put this out December 20th, 2020, a few days before Christmas. And I was just putting it out, I was making a video. It was the longest, it was like a 40-minute video. I can't believe I edited all that on my little HP laptop, but yeah, it managed to pull through. And I put it out, and it really didn't get any traction at first. And it wasn't for like a couple months. I want to say it was pretty. I can probably go look at the analytics for this. Look at the views. There's like a weird error on the views for this for some reason. Yeah, since published, it got like a couple hundred views after like 4 months. No, way longer than that. 76 days, 82 days. Yeah. I'm just trying to look at this gigantic graph that they have. By like 76 days, which is almost a year or something. No, I'm dumb. I have to pull up a calculator. I'm so bad at math. I'm so freaking bad at math. 76 divided by 30? 2.5 months. It got like 200 something views, and then it just kind of started like, it was just like slowly climbing, and then all of a sudden it just into this like ridiculous like 16,000 view count video or something like that. And then, oh, I completely forgot. It got like some traction. It got some traction on it. And then, weirdly, it has a copyright claim on it. What is that? Where is it blocked? Blocked in some territories. Oh, it's blocked in Russia. Sorry, Russia, guys. Not gonna be able to watch it. What was I saying? Right. So it got a little bit of traction, and a couple thousand views, which was obviously huge for me. It's like my 5th video. But that was like months after upload, right? It got this big wave of views, and I don't know what it was. I'm assuming just the Krobcat video hit the algorithm again, as it kind of tends to do every once in a while, and then my video probably got recommended, and people clicked on it because they just watched that one. And I'm just like, so I'm like kind of very surprised and I guess a little, whoa, okay, it's a lot of attention all of a sudden. And then I'm sitting at home like a month later or something like that. I forget the exact timeline, but like a month or two later, I'm sitting at home, and this was after I met Kat, actually. Wait, this was after I met Kat, because I remember her talking. I remember telling her about this like a month or two into us dating, and that was, I don't remember. Yeah, huh. That was like a few months into it. Anyway, I'm just kind of like sitting at home, and then all of a sudden I was about to take a shower. I remember this really vividly. I was about to take a shower, and all of a sudden I just start getting a bunch of comments. And I can see them on my phone. And I'm like, what? And they were like, I'm here from Charlie or something. A lot of them said something like that, and I was like, what? Because when you say Charlie, right, with like just that by itself, obviously what I think about is Critical, one of the biggest streamers on Twitch and one of the biggest YouTubers on YouTube. Charlie, aka Critical, aka Penguin Zero on YouTube, and I was like, there's no way though, right? There's no way. And then eventually I was like, what are you talking about? To someone's comment. And they said, Critical is watching this video on his stream right now. I was like, what the fuck? What the fuck? So I go over to his stream, and it was right. I jumped in right when he was at the Lucha Libre part, like near the end of the video, right by the tail end. And I was like, my hands were shaking, dude, because he was actually he was really enjoying that video. My hands were shaking. I couldn't believe it. It was so much attention. It was such a crazy, wild moment for me. And it's like, it was just really surreal. I don't know how else to describe it. It was really surreal to be watching comments from people in his chat about my video. And them enjoying it, and like, just like, what? Like a couple, double-digit 1,000 people in there. That was pretty crazy, and I got a decent amount of subscribers just off of that and exposure from that. So that was a pretty wild moment in my channel's history. So I have this weird sort of, it's at 27,600 views right now. And so I have this weird kind of relationship with this video, because on one hand, it's done great things for me and I put a lot of work into it. At the same time, the audio is really bad and it's very amateurish on my part. So like, I can't watch it. I can't watch it myself. And that's like specifically a me problem, right? Like, anyone else who watches that video is probably not going to have that same issue. They're just going to watch it like any other video, and then, oh, yeah, the sound happens to be a little scuffed. But for me, it's like, oh, I'm so embarrassed watching it. Like, I would, redo it. I feel like I could do it so much better if I tried it again. I'm not going to, because I don't want to, but if I did, I would, yeah. But yeah, that's like one of the few videos on my channel that's really exploded by my standards. And then right after that, but way before any of that happened, right after the video came out, but before any of that crazy stuff happened, I made a video on Jekyll and Hyde. This was still in the kind of like game design era. It's what I nowadays would just call like a deep dive, where I'm just going to pick one game and talk about it. And this was because for my birthday, I streamed Jekyll and Hyde for NES because I thought it would be funny. And that game is really bad. And I realized that while playing it, I didn't really know why it was bad. I'd always heard like, I had these like vague ideas about why, what was wrong with it. Obviously the AVGN video, but like his video is more for comedy, and there's not like too much actual like digging into what's wrong with it. And playing that game, I beat it, by the way. My stream crashed, and I didn't realize until I'd already beaten the game. But I have beaten the game and gotten the true ending. There's 2 endings to the game, by the way. The game has so many problems. The game has so many problems with it. Like it is literally randomly designed. There are enemy patterns and level layouts that are randomly decided. Behaviors are random. So much of everything in that game is random, and you just have to like deal with this onslaught of like, is there going to be a thing here? How's it going to move? What's it going to do? Is it going to go up or down now? Oh, it's going down or up. How fast is it going? Look, the goddamn spiders in that game. Oh my god. The behaviors of the same enemy will change depending on what level it is, like the bomb guy. There's a different way to dodge the bomb depending on what level you're on. What the fuck? Why? Like, it is horrible. And I have a very good understanding of the way that game works now. I've had to sit through it. So I wanted to make a video about it because I thought it was so intriguing and how bad it was. Video after that, Guilty Gear's Metal Mechanics, which was, again, just me talking about game design, talking about why I think Guilty Gear is so cool. Nowadays, I probably wouldn't make a video like this, just because it's a lot more focused on the design element. But I would probably just find a way to maybe sneak in what is cool about Guilty Gear and its systems into like a different, a video about something broader. But yeah, that's what this is. That's what this video is about. Why it's about how cool Guilty Gear's mechanics are and how they all work and create a really interesting combat system. After that, the PS1 game that took 20 years to release. I'm sort of going through these because there's not a ton to talk about with some of them, but yeah, PS1 game that took 20 years to release. ... I was trying out like titles like Does Anything Work Better or something like that. And this one was a cool one. It was about a game that was made 20 years prior, but had never been released. It was on the Sony Net Yorose, which was essentially a dev kit. It was made using Sony Net Yorose, which was a dev kit that you could just buy for the PlayStation 1. With like all this bundled software and stuff, so you could just start making games from your home for a bit of an investment, but you could do it, and it was kind of unprecedented. For the most part, that kind of thing only really existed for PC gaming. There was never a way to start developing games for consoles that had been accessible before. Not really. So it was a cool story, and that the game, I want to say it was Magic Castle. It's called Magic Castle. Really cool little roguelike game that has a cool atmosphere, kind of surreal, some solid mechanics, and I don't know, it was fun. It took, they finally, the creators put it out, and I played through it, and it's a cool game. It's a cool game. I don't have too much to say about this video, but it was on a neat topic. I'm glad I talked about it. Next was on Burying Icarus, the alternate reality story. This one was cool. I really liked. I found this story about the alternate reality series. Actually, this came from my blog because I played Alternate Reality: The Dungeon. I want to say is what it's called on the for the blog, which is where I discovered the story of the alternate reality series and what it could have been. And yeah, it's just to quickly recap. Essentially, the idea was that this was in Criminy. When Alternate Reality: The City was the first one. There was only ever 2 games in this series. 1985. The idea was that Alternate Reality: The City was about the someone, the player character being basically being abducted by aliens and taken to waking up in a medieval fantasy world. And the first game, The City, was this whole big city that you would be able to walk around in, and there were different areas. You could find little secrets and places that you couldn't go yet. And the idea was that there would be what nowadays would probably just be expansion packs or DLC or something like that. But essentially, you would buy other games like Alternate Reality: The Dungeon, and then that would allow you to go to when you were in the city, you would go to the entrance to the dungeon, and then you would pop in your disc for the dungeon, and you would have basically like one mega game of alternate reality, and there would be a progressive plot line. There was going to be like the arena where you would go to an arena that was inside the city, and there would be all this like new combat mechanics that were unique to that entry, and then this whole like storyline that would progress as you played the different games. Really, really cool, ambitious idea, and the creator kind of got screwed out of actually executing on it because of technological limitations. Or no, it was a technological fuck up with the cartridges specifically that didn't. He'd already like figured out how to get the data to transfer between discs, but the manufacturer / publisher like fucked up that for the process and basically rendered the whole idea moot. So he ended up leaving. The dungeon was finished by someone else, and yeah, that's kind of it. We know the whole plan for what it was going to be, but the dungeon is definitely a bet. I played The City and I didn't like it. And I'd heard like these incredible like people who played this game back then treat this game like was this like godly, gift to man. And I played it and I really didn't like it. I thought it was very slow and boring and just kind of aimless. And I realized later after I put out the video that Alternate Reality: The City is not an RPG. It's not like a WRPG like, the Elder Scrolls games or something like that, or Ultima. Alternate Reality: The City is the first survival game. And that's what people gravitated towards. It was a survival exploration game, which is not a genre that I care much for. So, yeah, of course I didn't really care for it. Of course I didn't like it that much. But yeah, it was a cool story and really cool idea. Nowadays, and it wouldn't really exist anymore today. It was very like place and time. And with working with the technological limitations of the era, nowadays it would just be one game, right? Or it would be expansions to a game or DLC or something like that, right? But we have these systems now so we can do stuff like that. But back then, this was very ambitious. It's a cool story. The next actual episode of the Cellar was kind of like the last real think piece I did that was part of the main Cellar videos, which is called Why Do We Fight in Games? And it was basically sort of a philosophical, at best, analysis of why combat is so prevalent in video games, as like a system. Why is combat and action so common in video games when you could argue in many cases it doesn't really have to be? And I think the main conclusion I came to was that video games convey their themes through gameplay, and combat is a very easy way to communicate overcoming like conflict and overcoming struggle. So that was kind of my conclusion of why it's so common. After that was M.U.L.E, the step forward. This was the first video where I talked about M.U.L.E. I've always loved this game. I talked more about this game and Danny Bunton in my EA video, but this was the first time that I really had dedicated something to talking about that story, because I do care a lot about it, and I think it's a real shame what happened to her, and how, I don't know, like how her life and career turned out, and the way that her life changed after her transition and all that. And it was, I don't know, it's because for such an incredible game that is just literally, you have to understand that multiplayer gaming barely existed when M.U.L.E came out in around 82, 83, sort of, depending on what release you're looking at. Multiplayer gaming barely existed. The most you would get is high score games where you would hand off, like, in the arcades, like you would hand off one player to the other. What am I trying to say? And try to get a higher score. There was things like Pong and the things on the like the Magnavox Odyssey. And, you do go as early as that. The origins of gaming are in multiplayer. But something that was like a party game. Does that make sense? Something that was actually meant for multiple people to gather around and was a competition in the same way that something like, a board game would be, or something like Monopoly. That did not exist. That barely existed. And games that, and again, attempts to do something like that with games like, it was games like Pong. It was like really basic, like we're doing video tennis. M.U.L.E was not only complex, it was very intuitive. And once you play it for a little bit and you just explain the basics of, like, it's just basic economic principles, right? It's very intuitive and it's really fun. It's really fun, and it's meant for like 4 people to get around and play a game. And it's also very, like, it's very ambitious in its design for the time. And it holds up. It holds up. It's still fun if you go back and play it today. It's like, it's such a rock solid game. And it was like kind of a proving, like literally like a proving ground. Like Danielle Barry Bunton was considered one of the pioneers of multiplayer gaming for a good reason. Is that she was actually trying to do stuff that hadn't been done before. She was one of the first, she was on a lead developer on one of the first games that used a modem to play over the internet in like the 80s, right? Like actual trailblazer in the industry. And unfortunately, I mean, it's a shame that in gaming a lot of people don't know that much about gaming history. Specifically, I mean, people who you would think would be into gaming history at all. It's sort of weird. Like, there's so many people who, like, they consume games so often and they call themselves gamers and all that, but like they don't know shit about the history of the medium at all, right? Like they don't know a lot of people. They don't know a lot of these people, they know, like, I know who Shigeru Miyamoto is. I know who Kojima is. And it's like, there's so many people who are important to this industry. And I don't know if that's necessarily, like, on them, but I don't know. If you talk to someone who would call themselves, like, a film buff, right? They know tons of, like, classic directors and composers and films and stuff. And there's this weird, like, ignorance of history amongst gamers for their own industry that I don't know, I find very weird and a bit of a shame. And that's kind of part of what videos like that and other things that I do, like my EA video or my other more historically focused videos, are trying to communicate or trying to show people and educate people in some sense, make them aware of it. It was really nice when I got comments on my EA video about, like, whoa, I never would have thought that these games from, like, 1983, these really primitive hardware, super simple basic graphics, I never would have thought they would be so complex and hold up so well. And I'm like, yeah, isn't it cool? It's really cool, isn't it? That kind of stuff makes me happy. Video after that was The Weird World of PC Fighting Games. This is a concept that I want to revisit because I think it's really fun, where the premise is that, like, well, fighting games started out in the arcade, and they would transition over to a home console, but a lot of them, you know, were made to be played side by side. They were made for competitive play. And that's a little difficult to do on a keyboard. You know, when you have a game that has, like, talking about, like, Street Fighter, for instance, you're gonna have, like, at least 4 directional inputs plus 6 buttons for your attacks, right? So you're working with 10 keys on the keyboard have to be reserved for one player. That's, like, a lot of space. It's just an awkward setup to get. So you would see, like, ports and things like that, but there weren't a lot of, like, there were a lot is the thing. But it was such a fascinating thing to me of, like, how would you translate something that was a genre that does not easily lend itself to, like, keyboard play to a computer, right? To a keyboard. So this one's fun. I came up with, it's just a fun video. I don't know. That's it. Is my nose bleeding? No, it's not. It's just really funny. Oh my god. Yeah. I made a part 2 later, and I want to make a part 3 at some point. I have a whole list of games. I just have to be feeling it at the time. Next up is the Mortal Kombat murder and other video game lawsuits. So I wanted to make a video about video game lawsuits, and then I kind of ended up finding this big, very sad story. 2 really interesting stories. The first one was from there's an old series of interviews that were conducted with game developers from the, like, 70s and 80s. It was called Halcyon Days, and you can go find it. It's, if you just look like a Halcyon Days Dadgum, for some reason, is the name of the website that, like, hosts it. It was released not in, like, any physical form, but as, like, on a disc in the 90s. And it's this really great treasure trove of interviews with some classic designers, one of which was Danny Bunton. And I've gotten information from there a lot, right? Like my Narc video, I use interview stuff from that. And I was reading this thing with the guy who programmed, whose name I can't remember right now. It was the guy who programmed, like, almost the entirety of the Magnavox Odyssey 2's library. And how he made this game called Casey Munchkin, which was a Pac-Man ripoff. And they got sued by a Atari specifically, because Atari had the rights to distribute Pac-Man in the U.S. I was like, was it Namco? No, it was Atari. They had the rights to distribute Pac-Man outside of Japan, and at the time at least, and they won the initial lawsuit and then lost when after Atari appealed, and it literally changed. It changed the definition of video games in U.S. law and defined them as like an artistic product. And I thought that was really interesting, because essentially the idea was that they were arguing, well, we didn't steal any assets or code from Pac-Man, so we are not legally liable. And this had never been, litigated before. No one knew what the legality of all this stuff was. They actually won the initial trial, and then Atari appealed, and the judge in the appellate court said that no, actually, in fact, the game is intentionally misleading, and that the when you're talking about video games have to be considered I believe, expressive. Video games are considered an expressive work, aka art, meaning that the content of the game itself has to be taken into account. The same way that, like, you can make two cars that look very similar, and that's not a legal problem. But if you, like, directly rip off some patented design or something, then that is a copyright infringement. Because cars are not considered, like, artwork in court. But games, this judge decided, were. Now, should they have gotten sued? I don't think so. Or should they have actually lost? I don't really think so. It was definitely, literally the stated intent was to capitalize on the Pac-Man market, because there wasn't a game on, I want to say the 2600. Or no, what did it come out for? Was it on the 2600 or like a different, like an Atari 8-bit system? I forget what console it was on. What system it was on, but that was literally the stated goal, was to rip off Pac-Man and do it and make something that could appeal to that market, because there wasn't a game for it on the system. There wasn't a port of it yet. But I think the game is different enough that it actually can stand on its own. And it's probably better if we don't sue people who make games that look kind of similar for copyright infringement. It's probably for the best. But it did redefine the way that video games are like what they're considered in U.S. law. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I was like, it's not enough for like a full video. Let me just look at like if there's other interesting court cases. So I ended up with, I think there's like a short one, and then the other half of the video is what the title is about. That being a murder that happened in the 90s that was supposedly inspired by Mortal Kombat 3. Where it's pretty dark. It was where I want to say 13-year-old boy was walking on the road with one of his friends, and they found like a rusty knife. They were the same age. He found like a rusty knife, and they picked it up, and he stabbed his friend to death he stabbed him like 16 times or something insane like that. So the kid died, and the mother of the victim, the mother of the murderer ended up a few years later suing Midway that they had because he liked Mortal Kombat 3, that the game had inspired him to kill his friend. And the court case, you read it, it has literally no legs. It's a straight up, it contradicts itself at multiple points. There's just straight up inaccuracies. There's points where she's talking about she wants to talk about Mortal Kombat 3, but she's describing Mortal Kombat 1. There's just things that are not in the game that she describes, that she says are in the game. There are things that she could not even sue for in her state. Just like a total disaster of a lawsuit. And it was just really sad, honestly. It really felt like this woman's last attempt to get some kind of closure, and super denial of the fact that her child was like a psychopath. Like really, just really like when you read into it, it is kind of like funny at how badly it's put together. But also very sad when you look at like, what was probably going on. Also, I would not be surprised if a lawyer had like talked her into doing it. Like, you could get a lot of money, if you sue them, and then just put together this shitty, awful court case for her, just trying to get as many charges as possible to see if any of them would stick. Just like an unfortunate story. I found like newspapers from around the time reporting on the death, and just a bummer. Interestingly enough, then, because I would then later make that video on the Senate hearing. Yeah. Let's see. I made some rants because I didn't have any idea what to make. PLATO, Birth of the New Era. This was a cool one. Dude, I'm not even close to getting to the end. I'll just like fuck, dude. I might have to even make like a part 2. I'll try to get to, what's like the last video that I made in that year? It would have been, holy shit, there are so many videos in 2021. There were so many videos. I kind of think of the Cellar in terms of like seasons, and each season happens to coincide with the beginning of a new year, where the whole 2020, like late 2020 to like through 2021 is like the season 1 of the show, and then after that, the very next video that I made in 2022 was the Die Hard, which I consider like a very significant, like a significant departure, or like a new, creatively I feel like it turned new leaf with that video and was trying out some new things. And then most recently, starting with 2023, started like using the camera, and I feel like that adds like enough of a different vibe to the videos that I would call it. I think it's like different enough. I think this year's videos have felt pretty different in a way because of that. But yeah. But there's a lot of videos here. So PLATO, yeah. The PLATO video started off as I was going to make a video about the first roguelike, because Rogue is actually not the first roguelike. There was actually a game that I talked about on the blog earlier, like way earlier, called Beneath Apple Manor, which is literally like the same game as Rogue, but made with no connection and no affiliation by complete happenstance, like a year earlier. And it turns out that the roguelike model is like this weird, it's, how like there's that thing that a lot of organisms keep evolving into crabs, like the crab form is like really just, evolution really likes the qualities of it. Roguelike is like that for games. Like, games just turn into roguelikes. When you look at like early history, there were so many people who were just trying to emulate Dungeons and Dragons, and the most natural way that literally dozens and dozens of them found was to make a game with procedurally generated levels where you would go through like through a dungeon and collect things, and like even visually being really similar. This is such a common, and like with no relation to each other, like no connection, no ripoff, just literally it was such a like a basic format that almost like just arose naturally from people wanting to make a game out of Dungeons and Dragons, a video game out of it, which I think is pretty interesting. The PLATO, then that's how I discovered the PLATO, because I'm like, a lot of these are on the PLATO, which was this old mainframe system that existed at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. And I just thought the PLATO story itself was really interesting. I thought it was really cool. So you can still play the PLATO now. You have to go through this whole weird process where you have to like send a guy an email like asking, like requesting permission to like get your account authorized, and then he will write you back saying that you're authorized to like the like giving you the okay, and then you can log on to the system. It's very interesting, you know. You can only really do it because there's maybe like a couple people a week who go on it, like very old people who remember this. This was in like the 60s. But yeah, it was pretty interesting. It was pretty interesting. I remember making this video. Let's see, March 13th. Yeah. So this was the period I talked about why I stopped live streaming. I remember, so in the first half, so for some reason, I had like an anxiety problem my whole life. And I was doing pretty okay. Like I didn't have an issue with it. And then for some reason, at some point in like late February 2023, I started to get really bad panic attacks. And I would get them, they started getting more and more intense over the course of like March, to the point where I was having them pretty much every single, not even pretty much, just straight up every single day, oftentimes multiple times a day, which is not a fun experience. I would not recommend it. So I was having these just horrible panic attacks. And when I was playing KOTOR, when I was streaming that game, part of what made it hard for me to stream and why I just like stopped streaming for a long time was because I was playing the game and I was like literally feeling a panic attack coming on. Not because of anything from the game itself. It was or anything like related to streaming. It was just I had such a problem with intrusive thoughts that were triggering these anxiety attacks, that like I would just be doing my natural thing and then just intrusive thoughts coming along. I could maybe talk about my anxiety later, but they're at a different time, more in depth. But excuse me, that was bad. I started going to therapy around May of that year, and then 8 months later I came out doing way better, and I've been way better for a long time. Thankfully, I had a very, very nice, very good therapist. But I remember putting together the PLATO video, and it was hard for me to make because I literally kept having panic attacks while I was making it. So when I look at this video, that's kind of just like a weird association I have with it, even though like I think there's some interesting stuff in there. There's some cool history, but when I look at it, I just kind of think about the process of making it and how stressful it was, and like how I just had to like force myself through it because I don't know, man. It was just hard. It was hard. It was a hard time. It was one of the hardest times in my life, honestly. Those few months. Really bad. Really bad. Next video was PlayStation E3 2006, how Sony lit themselves on fire. Bit of a mouthful title. But it was another story, kind of almost as a sequel to the Konami video, in the terms of it being a really bad, a big disaster press conference. And this one's fun. I like this one. It's an interesting story. It's a fun. I love the whole business politics that surround new console launches. Like, it's so entertaining for me. It's like I'm like in like the Gladiator stadium. It's like I'm in the Coliseum. I'm watching the gladiators duke it out, and just enjoying the bloodshed. I love it, man. And this was like a really funny instance where, like, man, this was a complete disaster. When you watch, everyone always focuses on the price tag, but when you watch that conference, oh, there's so many warning signs. There's so many warning signs that this thing is going to be a disaster. All of the trailers are pre-rendered or fake fake gameplay. They just have like nothing to show off. Most of the games are like coming, quote unquote, coming down the pipeline, like later. Like, is there gonna be anything on this thing at launch, kind of thing. And just see everything just built. That's where the famous Genji 2 giant enemy crab clip comes from. Just so many funny moments, and just like the tension building up to the eventual disaster announcement of the $599 US price tag. Yeah, just really funny. If I do kind of want, the only other one I could make to like complete the trilogy would be the Nintendo 2008 E3. That was the one that I want to say had the Wii Music? Was that what it was called? Just that really shitty music game for the Wii that they demoed on stage with like this like middle school level band performance of the Mario Brothers theme. I might do that too. Yeah, after that, Religion, Playboy, and the worst video game marketing stunts. That was another fun one. Again, it's a topic that I enjoy quite a bit. Bad marketing. Playboy accidentally discovered. So the way that I found that article, so the way I got the idea for that was, oh, what was it? I discovered somehow that there was an issue of Playboy magazine that had a whole section on video games back in whenever. And I found the PDF and I read through it, and I was like, no fucking way. They recommended the Guy game. Go watch that video if you want to know what the Guy game is. I guess I could briefly summarize. The Guy game was like a weird, trashy. The idea was that this dude was he went to Venice Beach and he filmed during like spring break. So there's all these young, hot college students out, and he basically filmed a trivia game show with just girls he picked off like not off the street exactly, off the sand, you know. And then if they like and then at the end they would like flash their tits. That was the idea. And he somehow, I think it was supposed to be like a game show, and then he was like, wait, it doesn't make any sense as a game show. So he made it into a video game called the Guy game, and it's really weird. It's like you have to answer the trivia. No, it's like you have to guess whether or not the girl is going to get the answer right. And then if you get it correctly, you get to see the clip of them showing their boobs. Bad news. Turns out that one of the girls that was showed off lied about her age and gave them a fake ID. And then, oh, what? You're going to put this out for that there wasn't this? You're going to actually put this on a thing off in the that anyone can buy? Oh, I'm going to sue you for distribution of child pornography. Like, those dudes were very sleazy, but at the same time, that girl's a fucking idiot. Like, I was like, what the you gave them a fake ID and then agreed to flash your tits when you were 17? You fucking moron. What? You just lied to them. Like, I actually felt kind of bad for these sleazeballs. You just lied to them. Because they did vet everyone. There was a vetting process. So, like, yeah, that version had to be pulled from store shelves because it was fucking child pornography. And then Playboy magazine recommended that version. I mean, not specifically, like, no one knew at that point, but it's just really funny that Playboy magazine recommended, excuse me, unintentional child porn in the pages of their magazine. That's really funny. Let's see, Girls of Gaming. This is a historic one because Girls of Gaming was where I discovered Dave Halverson. It was originally just going to be a video on I was just looking up gaming magazines, right? I want to do a video on gaming magazine history. And then I found Girls of Gaming in like just a big list. And I was like, what's this? This looks trashy. Let me check it out. I love trash. So I read through it. I actually thought it was, I went to hell and back to find scans of that magazine. I went to like torrents that had not been active in over 10 years. I went some places to find as many issues of that magazine as I could. And I also discovered Dave Halverson in the research for it. And that is how I discovered that became the ground zero for Die Hard. The whole Die Hard series. It's basically like a weird prequel. An in media res prequel to the Die Hard series. The documentary series. So go check it out. And I like, it's an interesting story, right? It's an interesting story because those magazines started out kind of respectable. Like the first one, you think it's going to be trashy, and then it's like a pretty interesting look at like sexy character designs or female character designs in general, and talking to the artists themselves and like what their process is, and it's actually kind of interesting and respectable in a cool way. And then it just evolves into Dave Halverson showing you his porn collection and just straight up like literal porn and like hentai and like what the fuck, we're not even talking about games anymore. And I was like, this dude's a character. And that's when I wrote down, the Dave Halverson video for later. We'll talk about that later. Weird PC Fighters 2. Sorry, yeah, Weird PC Fighters Volume 2. New Age of Kusoge. This is a fun video. It's kind of just it. I want to make a part 3. 920 views, not bad. Oh, this is probably one of my favorite videos of mine. Bandersnatch, the original Cyberpunk 2077. This originally had like a kind of awkward title, like, you thought Cyberpunk 2077 was bad. Just kind of a mouthful, but I wanted to include Cyberpunk in the title for SEO, and also because, it's like weirdly similar. Okay, so Bandersnatch was this awesome story. It was one of the first videos where I realized that I could make a video about a story that itself was so funny and so entertaining that I didn't have to write jokes for it. That's a very funny video, in my opinion. I think it's really funny. And there's no jokes that I wrote in. The story is just crazy. Like, there should be a movie about it. It would be a great idea for a movie. There was the Bandersnatch, I want to say it was a Black Mirror thing on Netflix, but that only has like some references to this story. It's basically completely different. This video is basically about a British software house called Imagine from the 80s, who they were big dogs in the 80s in the UK, and they had this game that was going to be the most ambitious thing of all time. It was the first game that had a hype cycle, where they put out a series of ads that like evolved over the months, hyping up this new game they were going to make called Bandersnatch. And it was actually going to be a 2-part thing. It was going to be Psy something and Bandersnatch. Cyclaps and Bandersnatch or something like that. And it turns out that behind the scenes, the game was like 20% done, and they were running out of money because they'd pulled some go watch that video. I'm serious. It's really funny. They'd pulled some insane business tactics to fuck over their competitors, and then accidentally fucked them over immediately after. And they had no money, and they were dumping all their funds into this game. It was run by a bunch of 20-somethings who had way too much money and way too much freedom, and they didn't know how to run a company. And then the whole thing was a complete disaster. And then they founded Psygnosis. Yeah, they just founded Psygnosis, and which went weirdly well. That is a really fun story. Running from police who were trying to repossess hauling big ass 1980s computers down the hallway, running from like city representatives who were trying to chase them down to repossess them. Just such a funny story. The U Testament, the ultimate religion. This was a fun one. I really liked making this. This was like very creator focused, where I'm talking a lot about Matt Dickey. I rewatched it the other day. I think it's pretty fun. The U Testament is just a weird game that I discovered years ago, around the time that it came out. Because it was just one of those like, hey, this is a weird game that came out recently, and most people never thought about it again after that. But I remembered it, and I was like, what was that weird religious game? And I think I literally, to get the name of it, I just typed in like weird religious games or like weird Christian games, and I found it very quickly. So I played it, and it was a journey. It was a trip. Habitat, the Blueprint MMO. This was a cool one. The first MMO really, and that was mostly just like a social experience. Really cool because there was a lot of writing from the developers about like, there was a thing called Lessons from Habitat. Habitat was a game from the mid 80s that ran on it was an MMO that ran on dial-up internet. This is like pre-AOL internet. And I don't even think it's internet at that point. I think it's like Usenet or something like that. And you would it was the developers basically going for, it would eventually turn into Club Caribou, which was a LucasArts. Yeah, this was a LucasArts game too. And the developers, it was like a 1.5 year long project. And the developers wrote this big document afterwards called Lessons from Habitat, which is just all the things that they learned. And a lot of it is just technical stuff that's like not very relevant today. Like, dude, 8 kilobit per second internet is the future kind of thing. It's like, yeah, or byte, I forget. I don't know if bits or bytes are faster. 8 kbps internet is the future. But there's a lot, the really interesting stuff from that document. And if you're making any kind of MMO or multiplayer game, I would highly recommend reading through that, because it is very fascinating. He basically talks, it's some of the developers. They basically talk about how the more that they tried to control, so they would implement these things in game. And this had never been done. No one had ever made an online game that was updating live, right? This was the first of its kind. And the more that they updated the game, and they would add in new content that they expected. They had this whole story about like this big treasure hunt that they spent like 3 months making all the areas for, and putting together this whole big puzzle. And it was going to be this really cool community event that they would be like, they're going to be stuck on this for like 2 weeks at least. And then someone figured it out in like 16 hours, and the event had been solved, and someone found the treasure. And they were like, oh, okay. And they realized that the more that they tried, and this like really irked them at first, this kind of thing, where they would implement something and people wouldn't interact with it, quote unquote, the right way. And what they realized as they continued developing the game was that the more that they tried to control the direction of the game, the less control they had. And the more they went with they worked with the community and went with the flow of how people were actually playing the game and the sorts of culture that the game was forming, they found that they were able to work with the game way more easily. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of like really valuable, cool lessons to learn from that video about like developers, ultimately you can't control how your players are going to act. You just have to you have to design your game around how people actually play it, rather than the way that you think it, quote unquote, should be played. Really cool document. It was called Lessons from Habitat. I would totally recommend looking that up if you're curious. The Wackiest Celebrity Game Cameos. This video is like, I have like a weird relationship with this one also. I don't think it's like amazing. I was expecting there to be way more stuff to talk about, and for some reason I just could not find things. I'm sure there's like a ton of cameos that I missed, but yeah, there's some funny stuff. Like the Christopher Walken stuff is pretty good. I don't know. It's fine. I think I could have gone a little deeper on it. Actually, funny enough, so way later, I did an interview with one of the co-creators of Rogue, which is probably one of the coolest things I've ever done. His name is Glenn Wichman. And one thing that he told me off camera was that, I sent him, I discovered him through various means. I had a connection to him. And I sent him an email and like, hey, here's some examples of videos that I've made on different creators. And he was really enthusiastic about coming on and doing an interview with me because he really liked my channel and what I was doing. And we were talking and he goes, yeah, I really liked this one. I watched this other one that I thought was great. And then I watched the one on celebrity cameos and I was like, oh yeah. And he goes, didn't like that one so much. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like very honest and he wasn't like an asshole about it. He was like, yeah, I just think that you probably could have gone a little like more in depth about some of the stuff. And just kind of I don't know. I came away from it feeling like he thought that it was a little bit shallow. And that was like super, I'm getting criticism to my face from a guy who was pretty cool. And that's nothing against him. He was very polite about everything. Don't want to make him sound bad because he wasn't at all. It was just like the first time I gotten like real criticism. I don't get a lot of criticism on this channel. On the main channel, I mean. I don't get a lot of criticism. Everyone just kind of loves me and it's awful, It's terrible because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. How do I improve? I just kind of try new stuff, I guess. Yeah, but then that is immediately followed by the Christopher Walken compilation, which you should go watch. That's a very funny video. And then the video right after that is... We're getting pretty close, actually. Kind of. Amano's Dream, the vision of Final Fantasy. Yeah. This is just a video I made because I love Yoshitaka Amano's art. I own an art book of his. The Sky. And I just wanted to make a video about it and the things that it made me feel. I actually remember when I first met Mama Max. He was like he was introduced to my videos through a friend of his who is now a mutual friend of ours. And that's how we connected because he just sent me a comment. Actually, he left a comment on this podcast on like episode 3 or something. And then, then later on we actually connected and befriended. And I remember talking to him one time and, he was really curious about like how I make my videos and all that. And he was asking me a lot of questions about that and me to him and all that. But he asked me like, how do you feel about Amano's Dream? And I was like, oh, I kind of wish that like, I think I edited some of the cuts in that a little too fast and that kind of bothers me. And he laughed. He laughed about it. And I was like, why do you ask? And he goes, that's my favorite video of yours. And we had to kind of like, one of us had to go or something. So I was like, oh, really? Okay. And then later on, I remembered it. And the next time I talked to him, I was like, hey, you mentioned that Amano's Dream was like your favorite video of mine. Why is that? And he told me that the first time he watched it, it was while he was still kind of like, digging through my channel. And he was just like tired one night. And he decided to watch one of my videos to try and fall asleep. Because I guess I'm so boring like that. And he just on a whim, because he liked Final Fantasy and he knew Yoshitaka Amano. He clicked on that video. And he told me that he told me that he watched that video and it was maybe like some combination of like, you know, his tiredness or the vibe of the whole thing. But he watched that video and I'll never forget this. He said it made him feel an emotion that he'd never felt before. That's what he said. He said it made him feel a feeling he never had before, a completely unique thing. And I didn't know how to respond to that because I just made that because I like the art. I think the pictures are pretty, and I wanted to talk about why I thought that. But it had this like massive effect on him. That video. I was like, damn, I that was like the first time I realized that my video could have a really huge effect on somebody that I just had no clue about, right? Like, I've had that before with some other videos that people had big emotional reactions to that they, you know, they left a comment about or something. And on my end, it's rarely that intense. But for other people, it really is. I'm just talking about something I think is interesting. Excuse me. And it has this huge effect on some people. And the way that people like interpret or, you know, respond to something that you make can be completely different from what you felt making it or what you even intended. You know, it's really wild. I never thought I would have that kind of effect on somebody, but yeah, I remember that very well. I still like that video. I think it's pretty cool. Although I do wish I did let a few cuts breathe for a bit before making them. Video right after that was DOS Horror, which was a fun video. It was I don't know why I made it in the middle of the summer. I don't know why I made it in July, but yeah, just DOS Horror, fun topic. I don't know what else to say. Fun topic. Yeah, I made a sequel that did pretty well. That did shockingly well last year. Sitting down with the co-creator of Rogue, Glenn Wichman. So I think I might have explained how I even met or how I came into contact with Glenn Wichman. My grandfather has like a Silicon Valley type job or like a connection. And I went to like a lunch with him and some of his colleagues. And they eventually asked me like what I do. And I described it. And one of the guys said, "Oh, I know a guy who like worked on this game. It's called like Rogue or something." I was like, Are you serious? Are you fucking serious? I was like, can I like get his email or something? And can I interview him? So I got the guy's interview an email, and it was not actually Glenn Wichman. It was a different guy, but he recommended that I reach out to Glenn. So I did, and that's how it happened. That's how that interview happened. And I think that was really cool. It's very different from the other content on my channel, but I'm really glad that I got to do it. Right after that, Gods and Plagues, Video Game Social Experiments. This was a video that was kind of like me. At this point, I was still doing weekly uploads, which is insane to me now. I think I just had like a fire in me because I was so excited about the whole project, and that lasted for about a year. Gods and Plagues was around the time that I started realizing that maybe I was getting a little burned out, and putting together a new video every week was a lot of work, and I was running out of ideas. So I was like, oh, Video Game Social Experiments. Let me do something like that. So like nowadays, I don't know if I'd make a video like this just for the fact that it's like very, I don't know, unspecific. It's a lot of time. Like I didn't think none of the stories were like that big, or like, they weren't like that interesting enough that they could stand on their own as like a whole video, in my opinion, to my standards. But like the stories are kind of interesting, so I just kind of made it's like a grab bag variety kind of topics. now I kind of have the time to like actually go through 1 or 2 video ideas and sort of scrap them if I'm not feeling it. Back then, I just had to kind of commit to an idea. And I think this video is fine, but and there's some fun individual stories in there, but as like a whole piece, for me it's kind of scattered and it doesn't have like too much of an individual like identity. I kind of forget that I made it very often. This was like a kind of around the time I was like, maybe I was thinking about maybe slowing down my upload schedule, which I would eventually do. Hey, the next one, guess what? Another video kind of like that, the game music of the Tokyo Olympics. This is a weird video, and again, not something I would make nowadays. Maybe like on the second channel, on the side channel, on the Cellar plus R, but not a main channel video. This was because the Tokyo Olympics, the 2021 Tokyo Olympics, featured a lot of video game music in the opening ceremony. And I thought that was cool, and I just wanted to make a video about it, I guess. Very casual video kind of on my part. And it was inspired by the format of like NPR. So like, if you've ever listened to NPR, they'll do a lot of things where they'll be like, oh, they'll talk about a piece, and then the piece will be playing in the background. They'll talk about the composer and some quick details about it, and then transition into a bit about and just playing a little bit of the piece of the song. And that's what this was. It was styled after it. This was like a chill NPR style. We're gonna listen to music, guys, kind of video. And I think for what it is, it's kind of cool. We'll probably just make this a second channel video if I even felt so inclined. But yeah, this again was a product of like me just kind of having to commit and like, oh, what can I make a video about? The Tokyo Olympics, the game music? Sure, that'll be this week's video. Next one, 480, Steam's secret game. Funny enough, one of my better performing videos. I think the thumbnail is pretty cool. This was like a stealth, like I wanted to talk about Space War, but I know no one's going to care about Space War. And I think it was just like a funny to be like, hey, here's like an interesting thing about the game, like a good hook for the story is that it's now it's now like a tricky it's like a sneaky piracy. It's part of this weird piracy scheme on Steam, which is why it's 480 Steam secret game. Cool video, and then that would eventually lead to me wanting to do the Space War Olympics tournament, because the Space War Olympics in 19 whenever was the first competitive gaming tournament held at the AI labs at Stanford University. The old ones. The new ones don't exist anymore. Sorry. The old ones don't exist anymore. There's a new one on the campus, but the old one was like somewhere else. Followed immediately by Aftershocks, The Legacy of Quake. I love this video. I think this one's really good. Probably one of my best videos, if I'm going to be honest. I think that like I love the whole history of Quake and id Software. I'm a big, like Doom Quake history nerd. So like an Idian history buff. So I wanted to make a video about all the crazy shit. Like I was just thinking like, man, this game is so influential. It impacted so many things. So I wanted to make a video just covering that and going through it. I think this video is fantastic. Like, I think it's paced really well. All of the information comes by. I don't think it's like all the information comes in, and it's a decent chunk of information. I think it covers all the bases of like what you need to know. It does it like in a pretty snappy way. That's like also pretty stylish with the music. I just think my editing on this one was so good. I covered so much information that I wanted to. I think it's like genuinely like a pretty good overview of the history. And that like you can actually learn some shit from this one. Covered all the information. This was like a video where I was like really satisfied with, where I felt like I covered all the information that I wanted to, and I covered it well. And it was really cleanly edited. Just really good video. I love the title. I love that it's of Aftershocks. I thought that was really clever, obviously. Yeah, I really like that one. And then I went through a period where, again, stressing out about a weekly upload schedule, The Sims that never was. This was like, fuck, what do I make a video on? Canceled games? Because I knew about, I'd made a blog post about Citizens Backwater Affairs, which is what the video is about. And I thought it was an interesting story. But it turns out that, like, yeah, you can't talk about it for more than 6 minutes and 40 seconds, turns out. It's a cool story, cool demo for a game, really. I would love to see someone else take another shot at that concept. It's really cool. I love the artwork. I really wish this game had not been canceled by some dumbass who thought that people wouldn't be into a civilization management game, or, like, you know, a life management game. Like The Sims. Yeah, but that was absolutely a case of me going, fuck, what do I make a video on? And then I tried to make canceled games, and then turns out I just couldn't get enough stuff together in time. I couldn't find enough material, and I couldn't find enough games, and it was like, this is the only thing, I should just cut my losses and just make a video just about this. So I kind of framed it as, like, experimenting with shorter videos, but no, it was me, like, I just didn't have enough. It was not an experiment by choice. It kind of just had to be that way. I think the video on itself is just fine, but yeah, definitely, like, part of me feeling the strain. Sega and the actual Yakuza, my best performing video ever. This was inspired by, I was listening to, like, the Castle Super Beast podcast, which is, like, my favorite podcast, and Pat on there was mentioning, like, was this around the time the Blizzard stuff was going on? I don't remember. They were talking about crime in the games industry, and he was talking about all these different, like, video game entities who have, like, committed actual crimes, and he mentioned a thing about Sega being run by the Yakuza, and I was like, that sounds interesting, let me look that up. So I thought that it was, like, really, I did some research and I learned about it, and then a little while later I decided maybe I could make a video about that. So, yeah, not like a particularly new... There's a few other videos on the topic, but I watched them for research to, like, get... Okay, for just, you know, for, like, sources, basically. And honestly, I think my video is probably the best one on the topic. I'm going to toot my own horn. I think that it goes over, like, a really good overview of the history of the Yakuza as an organization and their ties to the... gaming and gambling, specifically starting with gambling industry, and then the weird history of Sega, how Sega was founded by a few American guys in Hawaii in, like, the 30s, and then moved to Japan. Like, I had no idea that they were founded in America. It's like an American-based or founded company is where its origins lie. And then the whole story of how they got to Japan is really interesting. And then to kind of see the connecting lines between them and the Yakuza. I think it's a good video. And then for some reason, this was so weird. I remember going on... Where was I? I was on it started up at some point. Wait, September 18th was when I published it. And then started really taking off around November. Yeah, like a random, just like a month later, exploded. Just completely started going huge. And then even a bigger spike into, like, the hundreds of thousands of views mark. And I was like, what the fuck? I remember being on a date with Kat, actually. And just randomly, like, checking my phone because it was, like, we were, like, waiting for something. I checked my phone. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? But it was at, like, 17,000 views then. I was like, what is going on? Uh, it just like, yeah, it popped off out of nowhere. And then it kept going, and it still gets views. It still gets views to this day. I'm fine with that. I think and it was weird because like there was no Yakuza news. The Sega wasn't in the news. There was really nothing about it that like it wasn't a trendy topic. It was just random. It was just random, like a month or two out. Like it's probably more than that. After I it got a little bit of traction, then out of nowhere, yeah, that's what it was. It was this huge spike after like 3 or 4 months. Really weird. I think the thumbnail's good. It's probably one of my favorite thumbnails I've ever made. I think it's just like really simple. It shows you exactly what you want to... It shows you exactly what you need to see to get what the video's about. I think the framing of like Kiryu standing in front of Sega, like he's obscuring it, you know, kind of implies a shady element to everything. There's literal shading. What I did was I just got like a picture of Kiryu, and then I cut him out of the background and put the Sega logo behind him. And then I realized it looked a little weird. So it looked weird because the lighting on his face didn't match the logo. So I put like some shadows, some like gradient shadows in like a layer in between him and the logo until it roughly matched the lighting. And I think it looks really good. Next one, another video that has done really well for me for a while. Anything Goes, The Art of Guilty Gear. We're very close to the end, guys. Don't worry. Anything Goes, The Art of Guilty Gear. Again, just a video that I wanted to make because I love Guilty Gear and I love Daisuke Ishiwatari's art. Yeah, that was it. I had a good time making it. I don't know if I count. I made like a reaction video to the Smash Ultimate Sora reveal. The reason I made that was because I came up with a really funny joke that was funny to me specifically about O.J. Simpson. And I wanted to make the whole video just for that joke. And then I was like, yeah, you know, it is like a history thing. So I call it a history in the making. A little cheesy, a little cringe. But hey, I ended up getting so much more excited for the Doomslayer reveal of him as like a Mii costume than I was for Sora. But yeah, that's why that exists. Some Castlevania knockoff no one cares about. Yeah, this was a fun one. This was just like, I'm going to look at like a neat game that I've been interested in for a while. And I like it. I think it's just a kind of interesting video. I don't know. It's a lot closer to a modern Cellar video. We're like getting a little closer to that style. This was in October where I went fucking insane with videos. I think I was on like I think I slowed it down to like every 2 weeks, roughly, making videos. No, I had not. I was still going crazy. Or did it start with this? Anyway, I put out like 4 videos that month. October 2021. The 8 Eyes video, the Blood video. This was when I got when Critical watched my video, because that's when I got to hit 500 subscribers. That's why I made the video, that 500 subscriber figure extravaganza. Then I made the Blood video, which has also done pretty well for me consistently. How Stephan Waite gave life to death. I just really wanted to talk about like Stephan Waite's one. I wanted to talk about Blood and how cool of a character Caleb is, and how Stephan Waite's performance kind of like creates the whole character. He is inseparable from the character of Caleb. If there was some kind of reboot, I don't know, like if he wasn't doing the voice, you would have to get someone really good to come up with a replacement. But yeah, that's a fun one. I just loved his performance. I kind of think he might I get the feeling that he sort of resents the role a little bit, because I think he doesn't like doing like the scary roles that much. I think he likes doing like more fun, like lighthearted roles, as opposed to something like Caleb. Because I reached out to him for an interview, and I don't know, I sort of got the impression that like he doesn't really he's kind of like a little annoyed that that's the role that everyone knows him for when he's been in a lot of other stuff. Yeah. Why are there so many games based on Bram Stoker's Dracula? That was the concept for the video, is I looked around and I said, why are there so many games based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Martin Scorsese movie? Why is that? And they're all really different. There's at least like 6 or 7 different games based off of it that aren't just like ports or remakes or something. It's like completely wholesale different games. Yeah, that's also it. It was a fun video. Pretty, I don't know, fun video, not super like substantial, I don't think, but fun one, looking at a couple of games and cracking some jokes. Night of the Living Dead MMOs. I like this one a lot. I want to make a sequel to it. I've always liked the idea of legacy servers for MMOs and taking a look at these kind of forgotten games that have been revived by their communities and taking a look at like, well, the history of the original game and, you know, what it was, why it failed, and then is it worth playing today? And I think that there's like a good mix of games in that video. It was, it was Warhammer Online, which I actually went back and played a little while ago, and I actually think that game's pretty cool. Warhammer Online. What was the second one? City of Heroes. City of Heroes and Star Wars Galaxies. And I like that video a lot. I think it's like some good history. Some good just looks through some interesting games. I love the thumbnail. It's one of my favorite thumbnails I've done. It's a recreation of the Night of the Living Dead poster, but with like things from the games and and Eric Cartman from the World of Warcraft episode of South Park. And then a reading of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is a game that I streamed way back when I was still in that streaming phase. So that was like what I made, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 videos that month, including the reading. Plus I made like the pod. I was still doing podcast episodes, and yeah, man, I was so goddamn busy. Then we get to Narc and the Righteous Slaughter. We're almost done, guys. This is honestly, I think this is one of my best videos, if not my best. I just think that like it's the perfect blend for me of like the history, the humor, the pacing, just like everything that I think is like some of the best elements of like this channel and this project, I think, are in that video. Oh man, my neck. Jesus, did you guys hear that? Some of the best elements of this video and this project are in this channel are in the Narc video. I had a lot of fun making it. I was just playing Narc, and I was coming up with jokes. It just lends itself so easily to jokes. It's such a ridiculous game. Also, it was a real shock to learn that Raw Thrills, which is a company that you've absolutely seen the logo for, if not played one of their games, if you've been to an arcade in the last like 15 years. Absolutely crazy, excuse me, to learn that they're founded and based out of Skokie, Illinois. That blew my mind. And it's hard to like explain to someone who did not. Okay, I grew up near Skokie. I grew up in Rogers Park / Evanston, like northern Chicago. And Skokie is like one of those towns. Everyone's got one of them, right? Everyone grew up around one of them. It's one of those places that's like, it's nothing but a hometown. Like, like things don't happen there, you know? There's like some businesses and people live there. But like nothing big ever happens. It's not like a big center of industry or something. It's just a place, it's just a hometown. And that's it. And to learn, and for that to come up just randomly in the research was like, what the hell? Yeah. Followed by, who owns Tetris? Which is a fun video. And if I'm going to be honest, like I've talked about before, a better retelling of the Tetris story than the Tetris movie. So, yeah, I think this was just a solid little video about the history video about that. I think there were some funny jokes. It is a ridiculous story. It's one of those video stories you don't have to write jokes for. I found this random video that I cut in during parts of that video. I found this random video that was a school project that these kids made. That was probably for a video class or something like that. So when you see those weird cut-ins, it's just because I thought it would be funny to cut in these non sequiturs of these random children in their school project about Tetris or something. So that's where that comes from. If you were curious, I never got a comment about it, but yeah. Crawford fought the dragon. I really like this video. I want to say I made this video in the span of a week. I think I did. Yeah, I made this in literally a week, and it was or 2 weeks or something like that. I made this really fast. I read Crawford's book in a morning in 2 hours. I just fucking blazed. I tore the fuck through that thing. I learned about, I want to say, the dragon speech or something like that. I forget exactly how I became aware of Chris Crawford. Oh, it was because of Balance of the Planet. It's because I learned about, I always thought Balance of the Planet was an interesting looking game. I'd seen it before, but I never played it. And I was like, who made this? And I thought it was so quaint that he had a picture of himself and his wife in the credits. So I did some digging into him, and I found this just fascinating person in gaming history who, again, is not talked about, but is very not influential. He's not influential, but he was very innovative, and he kind of went his own way, and he went a different direction than everyone else. And I find that interesting because he had such a strong philosophy around game making. He really looked at it as an art and as a craft, and I think that for the time that he worked in, that was so interesting. It was so interesting, and to understand, to gather, the goal of the video was almost to take his life's work and try to summarize it, and to try to summarize it. So I read his book, I watched his speech, I read all this stuff about him, so that I could get an idea of the core common elements that he kind of worked on and polished up over his life. These philosophical ideas about the way that human beings learn and the way that we communicate and what interactive media, fits into that, and how groundbreaking it is for honestly human development is where he really gets to. And that was so fascinating, and tying that all together into one through line. That there's all these things that you could read as being these separate works, but you look at it, and I was able to put it together. I was able to fit it into one big puzzle, in one big puzzle, and see the whole there is a through line for his life's work and the ideas that he wrote about, and to then present it to the viewer. And I think this video is really good. This is the only video I've ever cried while making. The ending segment with the speech, where I just let the speech kind of play out with the Persona 3 music over it. I was just listening to that. It was just a really pretty, version of the song that was in some I want to say it was in Dancing All Night or something like that. Some official cover arrangement, that jazz piano swing version of the song from Persona 3. Blues in the Velvet Room. Yeah, Blues in the Velvet Room is what it's called. Yeah, the blues rendition of that song. And I was just listening to it, and I was like, I want to put a song or some kind of background to
to this speech because I don't want it to just be him talking. I feel like that's a little boring. Like, it needs something, right? And I just had this song in my head, and I'm just humming the song in my head, and I thought, why don't I try what about that song? So I pulled it up on YouTube, and then I played it, and then I played the video footage in Premiere so that they were, I was hearing both of them at the same time. And something about it, just like the emotion in his voice and the song and the kind of like the calmness, but there's like a somber quality to it. The desperation and he's talking about these, like he's such a good speaker. The emotion that he draws out, that like this is really, he's not just talking about games, he's talking about like his life's work. He's talking about a thing, like he's telling you like he's gonna fucking die someday, and this is like a thing he wants to achieve in his life that is like important to him. He's talking about something that is symbolically important to his life, like a creative achievement. This is some deep stuff that he's getting at. And you can tell how important it is to him. And then to have the contrast of this kind of like slow moving, calm, somber kind of song in the background that just kind of like just da-da-da, da-da-da, da-dum-bum, ba-da-ba. The contrast of it just kind of going, the beat just kind of goes. Something about it just clicked so hard for me, and I started tearing up. It was just like the emotion of everything just kind of hit me at that moment, and I was like, this has to be the song. This has to be the song. And even today, I'll rewatch it sometimes, and I'll still get like kind of chills a little bit when I watch that back. It feels like it's important, but at the same time, the song is so, I don't know, slow paced and chill that it almost feels unimportant, right? It feels like casual, and maybe that's the contrast. Maybe that's the contrast that elicits so much of a response from me. That's so affecting to me. Is the contrast that like this is just like his life. And in some ways, it's very monumental, but in other ways, it's just like a life. And yeah, I don't know. That's a great video. Crawford Fought the Dragon. I also updated the thumbnail later because I never really liked the original thumbnail I made for it. I like the new one. Yeah, I would recommend go watching that. And then finally, the Saga of Elf Bowling. Holy shit. This was just because I was like, man, Elf Bowling's weird. There's a lot of Elf Bowling games. I should make a video on that. And like, hey, Christmas, this was the last video. This was in December. And yeah, I kind of don't like this video. I rewatched it a few months ago. And I just think that like the editing is like really slow. And I don't know. It just meh. That's it. It's just meh. There's probably I could definitely see someone watching it and enjoying it, but for me, I feel like there's a lot of little things I could have done in it to improve it in very like minute ways, and that's frustrating for me. So, yeah, kind of a bummer to end off with a video that I don't really like too much. But 2021 was a crazy year, man. It was a crazy year for me. That was the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to have a cutoff mentally. I'm going to cut off at the end of the year. I'm going to switch to the video's going to be out when it's out kind of model, but I want to do like at least one video a month or I'm going to fucking die, I'm going to open a Patreon. I'm going to start making money. And for me, that's why like 2022 is the real start of like the season 2. For me, in my mind, it's like that's the clean break where there was a change in the way that I looked at making videos. There was a change in the quality of the videos. The fact that I was starting the Die Hard project, which was I've been wanting to do it for so long, and now I finally could because I was giving myself time to make them. Yeah. Yeah, it was just, I don't know, a lot of interesting era, the season 1 of the Cellar. A lot of experimentation before I kind of like, I want to say around the time of, I didn't even talk about The Quiet Man. I totally forgot about that video. Yeah, that's a fun video. Fuck, it's still partially blocked. You fucking assholes. I want to say around the time of, like, Bandersnatch. I kind of really started figuring out what the channel was going to be. That it was like, I think that, like, my strong suit was in storytelling and relating my emotions to you in the form of a story, right? I tell a story about a game I was playing, for instance, and I'm explaining, like, how I feel about it. And that's like my strength. And instead of doing something like making think pieces or something like that, like I don't want to make think pieces. I want to tell stories, because I think that's where, like, the core, that's where, like, the emotion is. And in the best examples, like in the best videos I think on this channel, is where I succeed the most at telling a story about something. Yeah, so, I mean, this was just kind of a look back at the first year of the channel. I already did a retrospect on the second year. But, like, yeah, if you have anything to, like, say or reflect, if you've been on the channel for that long, absolutely, like, let me know. I also just kind of forgot to mention, like, how I made a separate, like, this channel separate and everything and all that, but how I started doing the Cellarcast and everything. But, yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you guys have any other reflections, feel free to get sentimental about this channel or the main I keep saying this channel. The main channel. And, hey, what's your favorite video of mine, right? And why? I'd actually be really curious to know. I'd love to know why different people's favorite videos are their favorites of mine. I don't always know what people like about my videos. I just kind of stab in the dark all the time. But, yeah, I'm very grateful to all the people who have, like, been sticking with me and shouting my stuff out and just enjoying it. And I don't know, if you've ever enjoyed a video, like, that's enough for me. Like, that's enough. It's enough justification for me to do this, where I feel like I'm doing something that's good. Yeah, I'm doing something that's good. Yeah. Well, if you've been listening to me this long, this far, feel free to list. What the fuck? Thank you for listening to me ramble. If you have a question, please leave it down in the comments below, but phrase it in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. I have the Patreon and main channel. Just put out a video on there. Big as battle. Some weird old Laserdisc games. Check it out. Thank you so much, everyone who's been watching this, listening to this podcast too, and enjoying this podcast. I don't know why exactly you guys like this, because it's just me rambling for like 2 hours, but yeah, it's been great. I love doing this podcast. I started this podcast. Fun fact: I started this because I just have a lot of shit to talk about, and no one to talk about it, no one to talk to about it. So this is just like a big vent thing. This is just me rambling for like 2 hours because I need to do that. By the way, that's how I got Kat. Our first date was like a few hours of us sitting in like a food court and me just kind of staring at her and rambling about, well, she was staring at me and I was rambling about like video games and like video games and weird stories about my family, and I think like funny comments I'd read under Japanese porn videos, and apparently that was enough for her to fall in love in like one date. So I guess I'm doing something right. I guess I'm good at this. If any of you guys are in love with me, let me know. After listening to this podcast. Thank you so much. Bye. I'm gonna go eat.